When you do have a moment of peace, you never know when the bully or bullies will strike again. Stories about youngsters committing suicide because they were bullied grabs our attention, and for good reason. Bullying can destroy a person's self-esteem and even sense of purpose. It can also have enduring effects way into the future. Questions we'll be addressing today: why do people bully? What makes one prone to being a victim? How do you stop the bully? And ways to deal with the effects of bullying. My guest is Gary Dierenfeld, a leading social worker, columnist, and expert witness in court. Gary is also the resident social worker in the Slice Channel program, Newlywed, Nearly Dead. And our lines are open for you to call in at any time. We don't want you to be shy. If you have any questions about being bullied now, perhaps it happened when you were a child and you're suspecting from what you're hearing that you haven't gotten over it, don't be shy. Do give us a call at any time. Gary, it's wonderful to have you back with us.
Good to be here, and I would love to hear from our viewers. It just makes our show and what we can provide more rich.
You know, I don't normally do this, but I am going to make reference to the last time we covered this a while ago.
Yeah.
I found it totally amazing the way somebody in their 70s, Gary, called us
Good point.
to say that they were still being affected in their life by being bullied when they were a child.
Yeah, I wrote an article, it's on my website, The Long Arm of Domestic Violence, and it's also the long arm of any violence, that these are incidences that kind of stick to the skin and affect people almost or many times for the entirety of their life.
But even domestic violence, I mean, that is a major form of bullying.
Excellent point. And so when you say, where does bullying come from? We do see disproportionately that children who exhibit bullying behaviors are exposed to similar behavior in the home. And so when we want to deal with the bully, we don't want to deal with that child in isolation. We are curious what is going on inside their home and how does that relate to this child's behavior.
It is a power thing, isn't it, Gary? It's all about power.
It's about power and control. How do I own you? How do I get my needs and wants met over yours? And so bullying also tends to be about self-righteousness. It's about me, what I want, and it can be at your expense.
Is it true sometimes, Gary, that the bully was once bullied, they got up one day and said, look, I had enough, and they started victimizing other people? Do you ever find that? You hear some of these stories.
You may hear some of those stories.
Rare.
But in my experience, that is less the case than children who have learned by exposure to use violence to mitigate their needs and wants. Oftentimes, these are children who themselves have low self-esteem and are at times inappropriately also trying to feel good about themselves at the expense of others. And so these are children who we have to teach how to cooperate, how to team build, how to use non-aggressive strategies to mitigate their needs and wants. We have to get them under control, and sometimes even their families on board who may be giving messages like, boys will be boys, or girls will be girls. I cringe when I hear those statements because it's as if to say this is okay when it's not.
You deal with a lot of kids, widespread I'm talking about here, not just children, but their families as well. You're an expert witness in court. You see behind closed doors what others just
Good point. Yes,
don't.
I certainly do see behind closed doors.
I brought an article in here today, or the information about an article, because it takes sometimes the front page news to see what's really going on, but it tends to be exaggerated sometimes, seemingly. For example, what we saw happen in Germany. With the shootings, what we saw happen in the States, and then you start to see profiles.
These are the worst case examples of bullying gone nuts.
Completely nuts.
Yeah. Cases
of suicide happening. When you see these types of stories, if you want to put them that way, Gary, do you approach it from the point of view of, this is a real exaggeration, it's something completely at the other end, or just something we all need to take note of?
For me, these are the canaries in the mines.
Wow.
So these point to, those are the most severe, but there's a whole bunch that don't break through the surface that are causing plenty of problems for people everywhere. Those are the canaries in the mines. And they draw our attention to the problem so that hopefully we focus a little deeper.
And another one, and I'm just going to call this girl Lindsay. This was a story that was published in Canoe.ca and also in the Toronto Sun. And now I highlighted some of the points of her story because she went on the internet because she wanted people to know what she was going through being a victim of bullying. She got a lot of response and raised a lot of awareness about this particular story. Now, she goes to a school in Mississauga, 16 years old. Now, the interesting thing is she got bullied because she was so-called too pretty and had clothes that looked too good. So people started picking on her. It started off just name-calling, just targeting, snubbing, gossip perhaps, and then it escalated to the point of pushing and shoving. And it culminated when she was on the school bus, and the girl ended up with gum stuffed down her blouse, ended up punched across the face. Now, that girl was suspended for quite some time, but a couple of the other girls that were involved, the girl who punched her in the face.
Violence.
Yes.
Okay.
But there were others involved with the pushing and just tormenting this girl, and 2 of them were also suspended. But as the case turned out, Lindsay was the one that ended up being removed from that school, put into a mall on some kind of a work placement in lieu of going to school. Why she's upset and her mom is that they're feeling as if they've been the ones suspended or perhaps expelled from school, while these girls who tormented that girl are still in the school, and now they're threatening to find her and beat her up again. Highlights a major story here, got some responses, one from an 11-year-old child that said she was kicked so hard she couldn't even breathe. Another 46-year-old reader that said, look, I was affected for life. I'm still affected, self-esteem-wise.
Example after example of the victim being victimized yet again and yet again. And so I don't know what goes through the school's decision. And part of me sits back and say, well, is it easier to take this victim and place her elsewhere than the 3 or 4 or 5 or 10 other students who were the victimizers? And so I wonder if that forms part of the decision, which in my view is the wrong way to go. You don't blame the victim. You don't victimize that person further. The other thing your story brings out is that in many cases of bullying, it's not just name-calling as if that's, acceptable. It's not. It goes on to violent events. And I recommend to parents, teachers, school boards, in view of absolute physical aggression, police should be brought in. This should be dealt with under the Young Offenders Act. The reason I am so firm on that is because we are now talking about physical assaults. Okay? It's no longer just the threat, the upset, the name calling. It's a bona fide physical assault. And that is so clearly criminal behavior. If you want bullying to stop, you have to give a clear and unequivocal message that it simply will not be tolerated. Now, it's not this zero-tolerance policy where anyone who says something untoward gets turfed. It's in view of aggressive, assaultive behavior. They should be met with a criminal justice system. It can't go on. When bullies finally come up against a wall that says, not going to be accepted, the behavior tends to settle down. But until then, no boundaries.
Would you say, Gary, that bullying is still very pervasive? I remember once upon a time, some years ago, if you want to put it this way, there were articles that gained the headlines about suicides affiliated with this, and still we see a lot of attention in the media being paid toward this. Has it been escalating? Or
I don't know about escalating, but it certainly
hasn't gotten better.
It's certainly pervasive. From my childhood, I don't know that we called it bullying per se, although we'd say he's a bully or she's a bully. But again, we dismissed it. There was that saying, boys will be boys, girls will be girls, and it was thrown aside. Now in 2009, I think we're at a point as a society to recognize that this is violence and it's harmful to people's well-being, and as such, there is no place for it in our schools or our homes.
Has the quality of bullying changed over time? Because if you go back to the 60s, the 70s, we kept hearing about the usual intimidating schoolyard bullying, and now we're hearing about the internet. Meaning these children can't even escape once they go home.
It's not that bullying has changed, but the mediums through which we can bully have increased.
Expanded.
So I can do it by text mail, I can do it by Facebook or MySpace, I can do it by email, I can do it by websites. So we have more avenues to actually harass persons than ever before. And, you know, I call it the picking your nose while you're driving scenario. There's something about some people, they think that when they're in a car, no one can see them picking their nose. And there's something about the anonymity or perceived anonymity of the internet that seems to give some people more license to bully than through, you know, face-to-face. And so it's what we call a more insidious. It's sneaky. It catches up on you, but it's just as impactful.
Wow, we need to talk about some of the effects on these victims as well. Let's go now to Andy on line 4. Hi, Andy. You're on the line. Whoops, Andy just hung up. Let's talk about the effects on these victims, because from what I'm hearing, it's far-reaching, Gary.
Fear and intimidation. You know, if I am bullied out there in the world, then I learn that the world is an unsafe place. I'm just not secure. And at the end of the day, these could be persons who are afraid to leave their homes, literally. And so it impacts on their ability to leave home, to go to school, to show up in public places out of concern that they may meet with harm. And if that is what's on your mind, how do you concentrate about your work? How do you concentrate about your schoolwork? How do you even get there? So this is very impactful, very impactful.
Parents certainly need to be aware of some of the signs if their child might be being bullied. Let's go now to Paul on line 1. Hi, Paul. You're on the line.
Hello.
Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, I was wondering, I work in an industry that's, I work in long-term care. So it's very women-orientated. And there's only a few guys where I work. And I'm finding, I don't mind at the odd time, it's a joke, male bashing. But sometimes it gets out of hand, and sometimes it makes you nervous, and sometimes it really affects your self-esteem. And sometimes it even comes from a supervisor. And I'm a little bit, I don't know what to do about it. And it does affect me. Sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes when you hear it from different people 3 or 4 times a day, you start going, it's getting out of hand.
What kind of thing are you hearing, Paul?
Yeah.
What kind of thing are you hearing?
Men. Well, some of it I don't know if I can say on TV.
Okay, well then don't bother. Don't bother. Paul, thank you. Gary.
So this also crosses a boundary into what we call workplace harassment.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And if you're in long-term care, you're probably in a regulated setting, and I would hope that there would be some policies in place, quite frankly, excuse me, that deal with workplace harassment. And if you look for those policies, it will likely spell out the process you should go through to deal with these issues, which could include dealing with the supervisor, and if your supervisor is part of the problem, dealing with their supervisor. It may, you know, sometimes we're afraid to deal with persons directly, and, you know, you be the judge of this, Paul, with respect to your own safety, emotionally or physically. But it may be as simple as opening up a conversation that says, listen, I recognize that I'm the only guy here, but when you're putting down other men, I start to feel uncomfortable, and I don't know that that was your intention. And so sometimes we just need to start by opening up a dialogue, non-defensively, non-offensively ourselves, to say, hey, I'm affected by that, and I don't know if you realized it. So you can think about that, and you can think about the policies in the workplace.
Okay, Paul, I'd like to thank you for calling in. We're going to go for a break now. Actually, when we come back, I'm going to be talking to Gary a little bit more about the whole notion of workplace harassment. In particular, Gary, once upon a time, and I have to say once upon a time because I'm hearing it more and more, that men do complain about being bashed. And again, it used to be where it was the women that felt very victimized, but I'm hearing more and more that the men are, and I want to hear what your thoughts are on that, but we'll talk about it after the break. Don't go away. Hello Hello again, and welcome back to our conversation about bullying. Gary Dyrenfeld is with me. He is a well-known social worker. He's an expert witness. And Gary, I want you to talk very briefly about this. That show that you're on, fantastic though. Newlywed, Nearly Dead.
It is so much fun. You know, never in the life of a social worker are you able to gather videotape evidence of the couples as they're annoying each other. And so normally it's a he said, she said, and I don't know if one is lying or telling the truth. But the beauty of the show is I open up the computer, and there's the video, and we can see he's actually doing that, or she's actually doing her thing. And so the persons, they see that, and usually they're appalled by their own behavior, which is a good thing. Yeah.
Wow, that's amazing.
So that's the power of video.
Now we're going to get back to you on the phone lines very shortly, but the workplace bullying. Today we're emphasizing school bullying, but it really doesn't matter. If you feel that you're being bullied, give us a call. It doesn't matter whether it's at work, in the schoolyard, whoever it is. But workplace bullying is something that it really needs some attention because it can be very insidious the same way, perhaps more subtle in most circumstances, but it has the same effects as it would on a child.
And it's different than sexual harassment. You know, these are not persons who are looking to gratify their needs at your expense sexually. It is back to the power and control issue in and of itself. It could be same gender, so it could be women to women or men to men, and it could be cross-gender, men to women, or as the previous caller showed, women towards men.
Yes.
And so these are persons who are made to feel unsafe for their own well-being, their attitudes, their belief, and where other persons may be looking to exercise control for the benefit of the bonus, status at work, the corner office, whatever.
But you've got to confront it.
Yes, or it continues. So it doesn't matter if it was at school, in the community, or the workplace, the degree to which it continues without confrontation, without being dealt with, it's as if it gives that bully permission to continue.
Wow. Let's go now to you, Julia, on line 2. Hi, Julia. You're on the line.
I've had a hard time getting through until I found out about the delay. What it is, bullying, it's a very prehistoric form of intimidation. It's like the wolves going after the lambs. And what I'm ringing in about, I'm 84, and my young brother, John, was hounded, and he was murdered by a bully back in England in the school which he went to from 5 to 11. And I always protected him. The bully didn't bother me because he knew I could handle him. But the other little children used to come and stand with me. This one day, I was out from recess 2 minutes late because I had to keep my eye on John because I knew this boy, James, who was my age, was 11, same as me, was after the little ones. And so I was two minutes getting back in the schoolyard, and my brother John was lying on the floor. And the little children says, it's James that's hurt John. And what he'd done, they'd taken the gate off the schoolyard wall to put a new one on. It was all jagged. He'd thrown him up against the schoolyard, bricks all sticking out, and fractured his skull. That was on a Tuesday at recess after lunchtime. He went home for lunch, because a long story short, and he couldn't eat lunch. And on his way back, I used to take him to school and bring him home because he was at the same school. He was started to vomit. So I took him to school, but the teachers brought him back home with me. And that Tuesday night, he went unconscious. The day after, he went blind. And on the Saturday of the same week, he was being buried.
Wow. Oh, Julia, we're so sorry to hear that.
And it took me, and it was Easter. And every time Easter's coming around, I always think about little John. And I went after this boy till he was in his 30s. Wherever I saw him, I'd cross the street and go to him. And if I'd have been older, I think, and not as I think I would have done something.
Julia, I want to thank you for calling in and sharing that story. Gary, this is something that went really, really sour.
And so, you know, tragic outcome. And
Very.
Julia, you were talking about Britain. You talked about, I think, during the war.
Yes.
You're not a young woman, and so it just goes to the point how these things we can carry them with us
Yes.
for years. Your brother was harassed, physically intimidated, and pushed and shoved. He obviously got a concussion, and the result of the concussion, it led to his death. And so here we have one of the most tragic consequences, death by misadventure.
Yes.
in a sense, an unintentional death, but nonetheless one of the consequences of physical aggression. And so, you know, when we talk about bringing the police in, when we talk about wanting to stop this in its tracks, here is the most graphic example of why. Okay? And, you know, the other thing that you mentioned, Julia, is this concept of the wolves and the lambs. And invariably, these bullies do know how to pick their lambs.
Yes.
And so, you know, the other side of the coin is with respect to helping victims cope, to helping victims turn from victim to survivor to thriver. We want to work with them, their self-esteem, their ability to self-protect, their ability to seek help when they need it,
Yes.
so that they're no longer intimidated. And so as much as we concentrate on, you know, what about the bullies, we do want to look at what about the targets of
Definitely.
bullies and help them to cope better too.
Okay, now I'm going to ask you about what makes a person perhaps predisposed to this. But before I say that, I do realize that anything different can be a source of attracting that kind of unwanted attention.
Sure.
You happen to be a bit overweight, you happen to wear a pair of glasses that kids decide for some reason to pick on, you happen to be too bright in school, you happen to be a constant failure in school, whatever that may be.
So in some cases, although
It
not
could be anything.
not always, don't strike me for overgeneralizing, but a common feature of victims
Yes.
is what we call poor ego strengths themselves. Their self-esteem may be somewhat compromised, such that they don't feel like they can speak out on their own behalf. They can't self-protect in that sense. Some of these folks have been victims themselves of domestic violence and or child abuse, where they're made to feel ineffective. When girls are witness to domestic violence, they tend to have what's called internalizing behavior. They will get depressed, withdrawn. They may be subject to being abused further as a result of those internalizing behaviors. Boys tend to act out when they're subject to witnessing abuse because they're modeling the same behaviors to which they were exposed.
So somehow, some way, the bully sniffs out a weakness.
Yes. Yeah.
Wow.
I like what Julia said. You know, the wolf goes for the weakest member of the pack when they go to attack. Why? Because it's the easiest. Okay? And so there are things that make some persons, some targets, easier for bullying. And again, so how do we help these persons? By teaching them how to assert themselves. By developing their competencies, their social competencies, that they can speak out, that they can defend themselves.
Yes.
So these are the strategies we look for that group.
Okay, let's go now to you. Coraine on line 1 from Alberta. Hello, Coraine. You're on the line.
There.
Hello. Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Actually, I have an appointment to speak with the principal today at 1:30. It's amazing I caught your show.
This is Alberta time, 1:30. Yes.
Yeah. And my problem is I have a 15-year-old daughter who has been repeatedly bullied since elementary, and she's in grade 9 right now, but by the same people. And this year, actually, we started out with a lot of bullying, and I had gone to the principal, and they brought in a program called Real Girls, and it was supposed to be building their self-esteem, being able to communicate with one another and solve problems, etc. But unfortunately, it wasn't mandatory. So the group of bullies have now gone to the wayside and they're not taking this program anymore. but have gone back to the bullying tactics. And I was just wondering, Gary, if you had any suggestions of how what I could do to go about getting some kind of solutions. I've tried talking with the school board, with the principal. Again, they brought in the Real Girls program, but nothing seems to be working at this point.
So that Real Girls program, that was for the bullies, not for your daughter?
It was for bullies, and my daughter was able to attend also. It wasn't mandatory.
Has your daughter been to a counselor herself?
No, actually.
Okay, I would suggest that.
With a program called You Can, and it's people standing up, to prevent bullying. We have that here in Alberta.
Okay, but I would suggest that your daughter go for counseling. Not that we're treating her like a crazy or a bad person, but for her to talk out her feelings with the counselor. What does it mean for her to be bullied? How is she dealing with this? And what strategies might that counselor provide your daughter specifically in her specific situation to help her cope differently? I know I've seen plenty of children whose parents have brought them to me for just that reason. One young girl, I recall, she was obese, and her parents thought that set her up as a target. And in fact, it wasn't so much the obesity, but the fact that she couldn't assert herself, and also the fact that when people made fun of her, she just disintegrated. Oh. And so, my work with her was to do some visualization, help her to imagine she had this sheet of glass in front of her so that as these comments were thrown, they hit the glass, not her, and slid off, and that she could be strong behind the glass. These are what we call cognitive strategies, ways of thinking to help our children cope a little differently. And it might be that something like that would be constructive for your daughter.
Wow, well worthwhile to consider. I want to wish you luck on that appointment. Thanks for calling in. We're going to go for a break now. We'll be back to you on the phone lines after this. Don't go away. Hello again, welcome back to our discussion about bullying. We're going to be back to you on the phone lines very shortly, but there's something very key that Gary was saying in our program, in fact, in bits and pieces throughout. But I want to make sure that no matter what, you take this away, okay? Although it's important for you as parents to advocate for your children, and of course, if you're a sibling, like we heard, to advocate, there's something else that Gary is trying to teach us here, and that is equipping your children to setting up something to make your child self-sufficient when it comes to dealing with potential bullies. If you can just crystallize that for us, Gary.
So 2 points. Certainly advocate for your child. Go to the school. That's absolutely vital. But the second piece, equally vital, is equip your child to cope better. And so that might mean personal counseling for your child. That might mean a group for persons who have been bullied. It might mean talking to an elder, to a minister, to someone who can help this child address what has happened to them and deal with these kinds of events, hopefully, more effectively, such that they don't have to be a victim. So,
and to realize that they've been victimized, it doesn't mean because they feel that big that they actually are.
Right, right. So we do want to get them help to cope better with what has happened and to protect them with different coping skills in view of potential future events.
Right. Okay, let's go now to you, Farouz on line 6. Hi, Farouz, you're on the line.
I thank you very much for the beautiful program you have. I just wanted to make a little comment, if I may, and that is that if we deal with the cause, because the doctor was saying that is coming from family, which is absolutely true. I believe that. I raised 2 kids that they are walking angels, 5 grandchildren, and they're the same, wonderful, and it truly come from family. And in front of me right now, I see a family virtue guide that we use that in the family, and I try to bring that to schools, because this book is really has a talk, and it gives you, let's say, concept about caring, compassionate, consideration, excellence, or go on till 52 virtue for 52 weeks.
Yes.
And
Nice.
then,
Farouz, thanks for calling in and sharing that. Now, Gary, I want to go back to what Farouz was saying here. Families that are somehow, and we don't want to point fingers out there, but the case is, well, children they see a behavior modeled. And one thing that has gained headlines, and Gary, you and I were talking about it before the show today, that had to do with bullying expressing itself in, well, abuse, like Rihanna and Chris Brown, for example. If you look at what they learned from their family, okay, Rihanna came from a family where her father was a drug addict. He came from a family where he regularly saw his stepdad beat up his mother. So he saw that kind of a behavior modeled in the home. And in many ways, we don't know what she saw. But having a drug addict of a father...
One is in part used to tolerating aberrant behavior.
That's right.
The other is used to seeing it role modeled. Bang, put them together, and you get more of the same.
But the sad thing is, Gary, you've got people in schools, people that, like Farouz, they teach their children to be sweet, to respect other people, and by the same token, they're sharing the school with other kids that have learned something awful from home. And this is a reality that we can't force
This is a reality.
these families to learn.
No, but I really like what Farouz said.
Yes.
This weekly family value program.
Right.
And, you know, one of the things that I suggest to parents with children of any age is get your children to participate in doing good deeds with you. Get them to volunteer. These are behaviors that are incompatible with taking advantage of others for your own gratification. These are altruistic behaviors. Excuse me. So if we're worried about your son or daughter being a bully, okay, we want them to engage in behaviors that are the opposite. It's not like you've bullied, I'm going to spank you for that. No, you've bullied, I'm going to teach you how to take care of others appropriately. Okay? So, and it's in line with family values as Farouz was suggesting.
Yes, thanks for your call, Farouz. Let's go now to Vince on line 2, calling from Alberta. Hello, Vince. You're on the line.
Good day, everybody. Yeah, I like your program. Just there's a lot of things, major discussions here. That bullying. I grew up in a family that were an average family, but then I've been working at oil patch and construction for like 30 years here, and I've seen so much stuff that goes on rigs about bullying, intimidation, and even where it comes to a place where one of their crew members on our crews. One night they had a blanket party for one of our bosses, and that was like about 3 o'clock in the morning. And they went after the tool pusher of our rig, and he almost died. They beat him just unconsciously. Now, a lot of times people want to we're talking about the bullying. A lot of times it's the power and security. They have to have a sense of security, these people. It's not so much what they want, but it's a sense of protection for their own insecurities. It's their own insecurities. And as time goes on in society, you see less and less sensitivity. And with that less sensitivity has been grown out there.
Yes.
If we don't...
Vince, I want to thank you for your call. You're saying that as society goes along, we're seeing less and less sensitivity. Gary, can you reply to this?
Yeah, absolutely. So, Vince, what I had said earlier is that when our kids are being bullied in the school and it leads to aggression, and I'm talking about the teenage kids, not the 3, 4, 5, 6-year-olds.
Yes.
It's reasonable to bring in the police. Children have to learn that there is a wall beyond which they cannot move, that bullying is not acceptable. But then beyond that, once they've gotten that message, we next have to teach them how to interact appropriately, how to participate in doing good deeds, how to make restitution. So I have to make good for the harm I caused you, and I have to apologize. And if we can do these things, hopefully we won't get that escalation. And one season after the other, things are getting worse than the season before.
Thanks for calling in, Vince. Let's go now to Estelle on line 5. Hi, Estelle. You're on the line.
Hi, how are you today?
Fine, thank you.
I really enjoyed the program today, though I'm a little tired, but I had to make a point, is that the bullying starts way back sometimes as a child. The child brings that into the marriage. In the marriage, it goes into the form of a spousal abuse, mental spousal abuse. And it goes on to the child, and the child, out of the children, you may have one child or more that will pick up the bullying also in their life because they're being bullied by that one parent.
Yes, Estelle, thanks for calling in and sharing that. Any feedback on that, Gary?
Yeah, and that is a common scenario that we do see. And, you know, we also look at how do parents consequence or use discipline in the home. Some are more prone to use corporal discipline versus other strategies. And we know that the degree to which parents use corporal discipline, spanks, hits, demeaning behavior, these are kids who are also more prone to role model that behavior, and they in turn use that in the schoolyard. So, you know, we don't recommend that you spank your kids, which is not to say you don't discipline them. You can certainly talk with your kids. You can help them make restitution. You hurt so-and-so. You're going to apologize and do something in their favor. You may lose a privilege. You may spend time alone in your room. So there certainly are consequences and teaching strategies, but we want to resist hitting.
We also have to be so careful not to discipline our children based on our emotion, because that could be very easy to do. You have a bad day at work, you come home, you take it out on the kids.
Good point. And so if how we're feeling intensifies our reaction, so in fact it's an overreaction, that gives children to act out similarly based on their feelings.
Exactly.
Well, if I feel this way, then I have the right. No, you certainly have the right to feel how you might, but you never have the right to hit.
Yes. Okay, let's go now to you, Kathy, on line 7. Hi, Kathy. You're on the line.
Christine, I just have a quick comment about bullying. I was bullied as a girl when I was 9 and 10 years old. That was in school back in Europe, and in our town, the biggest bully was the Communist Party leader's son, who was waiting for me around the corner every day going home from school to beat me up, twist my arm, pull my hair, slap me on the face, push me in the mud, and all that stuff. Well, who could stand up to them? I mean, his father was even bigger of a bully than the kid was himself. And my brother decided to put an end to it after months of complaining and crying. He said, okay, this is where it's going to end. They came with me, hid around the corner at the house, and when he saw me, the boy started beating me up. They came out and they beat the living daylight out of him. Now, I'm not saying it's okay, but that was the only way to stop that bully. And Christine, that boy never touched me again in his life. As a matter of fact, when he was 17, he apologized for his behavior.
Wow.
Well, nice to know that he apologized. I'm certainly not going to condone violence to deal with violence, but let me excuse me, let me go back to the message that when the bully is confronted and is no longer capable of bullying, it tends to stop. You used violence, if you will, to mitigate that. I'm suggesting police, I'm suggesting persons in authority,
Yes.
I'm suggesting removing the bully from the situation as opposed to violence begetting violence.
Kathy, I want to thank you for calling in, but keep watching, okay? Because when we come back, I'm going to be dedicating this particular segment to ways to stop the bully. Don't go away. We'll return. Hello again. Welcome back to our discussion. We're talking about bullies today. Gary Dyrenfeld is with me. He is a social worker and an expert witness in court. Now, the big question remains, we talked about it throughout the program in bits and pieces, but ways to stop the bully. I know there are many parents out there that they continue to be the mediator between their child and the school system, listening to their child's complaints, bringing it back to the principal, the teacher, whoever will listen to try to work this out. But what really troubles me, Gary, is that you still hear too many people out there that say, look, there seems to be no solution because for some reason the bully just doesn't seem to be able to be stopped. And not only that, there are many people that are being victimized through the internet.
Well, in terms of not being able to stop the bully, I sit back and wonder, then whose shoulders is the bully standing on? And sometimes what I hear
Good
is,
question.
yes, we had a meeting and their, the bully's parents were present, and they didn't see a problem. And so, so if the bullying continues, That's the question to be answered. Whose shoulders does the bully stand on? And then you see what you can do there, which may or may not be successful. Okay? You know, we don't have all the answers. We can't always protect people from everything. But that's where I look to. And if you don't get support, then I certainly urge parents to keep bringing this matter back time and time again to the persons in authority. That might be the vice principal or the principal of the high school. It might be the superintendent of education if you're not getting satisfaction at that level. And rather than seeing your child victimized, you make sure that the bully is held accountable to whatever degree possible. But having said that, again, you have to address the issue of the victim. Why is this person a victim? Because what we find is, you know, some parents say, should I change my son or daughter's school?
Yeah.
And invariably when they do, or not invariably, often when they do, their son or daughter becomes a victim at the new setting. And so, you know, why is this person the sheep who the wolves continue to prey upon? What is it that they're bringing to the party, so to speak? And that's why I go back to get some counseling for your son or daughter who may be the victim. Let them take a look at their own behavior, what they're doing or not doing that sends out signals that I may, you know, I'm a target, and how can they deal with that differently?
Gary, do we need to wake up to a reality that sometimes, and that's not every victim we're talking about out there, a lot of you parents are very much in tune with your children, you have an excellent communication going, but what really troubles me is when I see stories, in the news of course, of someone, and this happened quite recently, who not only was this person a victim, but this person actually ended up committing suicide because they were in so-called cahoots with somebody that they found in a chat room who pretended to be the kid's age when the person was much older. So what strikes me, to make a long story short, is that you've got some lonely kids out there looking for anybody who will talk to them, who could be misleading them.
Yes. So again, when we look at victimology, what makes you a victim? What is it about your own ego strengths? Why aren't your needs met? Are you a needy person? So these people may fall vulnerable to other wolves. And certainly the internet can be a great place to be preyed upon by a wolf. So again, I'm just going to come back to parents, take your kids, go for counseling. Parents, go with your kids, okay, to help the counselor understand what's going on, the nature of the issues you're grappling with. Maybe there's something in the relationship between the child and these parents such that the child's needs somehow or other aren't getting fully met and addressed.
Gary, as a social worker, do you ever find that some of these very needy children who are being victimized, now again, not every child that's being victimized is very needy, that's not what I'm saying, but some are. Do you ever find in your practice that some of these children's parents are also very needy and perhaps when they were younger were also victimized?
I do see that. I do see that with actually some degree of regularity.
Wow.
More often than not, it tends to be a woman who is subject to domestic violence and their child in turn is being bullied, and rather than addressing, you know, these issues forthrightly, they're looking outside and saying, you know, fix the bully, but they're still trying to keep their head below the bar. So I look to them and saying, again, how do we develop your ego strengths? How do we deal with your neediness? How do we help you to assert yourself and your child? How do we get you to help strengthen your child's sense of self so that you can be more self-protective and less the prey for these kind of wolves?
Okay, let's go now to you, Yinka, on line 2. Hello, you're on the line.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, my question is this. Listen, my son started grade 9 in fall, and shortly after he started, he was bullied in school. I brought this to the attention of the school principal, but obviously nothing was done because the bullying continued, and as a matter of fact, it got worse. Now my son is insisting I do not do anything about it. I'm concerned for him. What should I do? Should I... he's insisting I don't do anything. Now I don't know what to do because...
Great question, Yinka. Gary.
I never buy into the victim's fear.
Yeah.
When they say don't do anything, they're worried about retaliation, and then the bully really has you, right? Because you won't do anything. You can't be intimidated. That empowers the bully. And so, Yinka, my view is that you still have to go with your son back to the principal and deal with this forthrightly. Given that you're talking about a grade 9 student, these are young offenders if they continue to bully your son, intimidate him, and threaten or cause bodily harm. And so you can also take this to the police if you're not satisfied with the role of the school. But if you do nothing, don't expect it to change and get better. It will likely get worse faster.
Yinka, thanks for calling in. Now, I'm talking from my point of view. You're the social worker. But from what I hear, sometimes children that are bullied can get awfully aggressive with their parents when their parents say they want to intervene,
well,
because they'll say, you get embarrassed, or you get embarrassed me in school, keep out. And they can be very aggressive about it, too. But parents need to take heed.
That's right. Parents, you're there to protect your child. Your child is scared to death. And when your child says butt out, what they're really saying is, I don't trust you to protect me.
Wow.
Okay? And so you are going to have to act in a way that really is protective. You may have to put some strategies in place, such as I'm going to be taking you back to and from school. We're going to talk with the principal. We're going to talk with the police. But we're not letting this sleeping dog lie. And I am going to keep you safe. I will protect you.
And don't be afraid to bring the police in.
Correct.
Because too many people are.
Yeah. Yeah, and unfortunately, you know, we had that caller from England from years ago whose brother
got killed.
Died
tragically.
inadvertently,
yes.
The result of bullying. We don't want our kids to be hurt, whether it's psychological, emotional, or physical.
That's right. That's right. Well, Gary, we're out of time, and boy, you've given us a lot of information today. Great point you highlighted. Very serious topic, and it does not go away by itself.
Correct.
So we need to do something and stop the bully. Gary, thank you. That's all the time we have. See you again next time. I'm Christy Williams, and from all of us, thank you for watching.